We are 17 days away from the start of Penn State training camp. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr, and your questions are on the top of our mind today on the BWI Daily Edition. It's the BWI Mailbag with host Thomas Frank Carr and, of course, our senior editor, Nate Bauer. Let's get into it. Big day in Penn State recruiting coming up almost directly after this show. But before that, we're getting to your questions. The BWI Mailbag here on Thursdays, one of my favorite shows to do in the week because, as you just said before the show started, Nate Bauer, we're just going to sit and chat. We're just going to have a conversation with all of our friends over at the Lions Den message forum here on YouTube. Nate, how are you doing this Thursday?
I'm great. The British Open is on, so we gotta fly through this, T-Frank, so I can watch some Tiger Woods. Last time, probably.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. We also have to fly through it because we air at 3:00 on YouTube, and at 4:00, Tony Rojas, four-star linebacker, one of the crown jewels and most important players in the class of 2023, is making his announcement. So we're going to fly through the show today. We've got more questions than ever. I want to satisfy your curiosities, but to start with, we are going to go rapid fire through some. We're going to have a fun time today answering questions from the Lions Den message forum. Let's get into it. Of course, the best way to get your questions on the BWI Mailbag Show is to ask them, as I just said, at the Lions Den message forum, where if you subscribe right now for $1, you get 12 months of access to Blue White Illustrated. And that means you've got 52. I don't know if we're going to do it every week of the year, but a lot of mailbags to get your questions answered on the show. So sign up right now and get all that information, all that access. We are just days away from the start of Penn State training camp. I can feel the anticipation, the excitement, and the work anxiety building in my brain by the day.
Oh, it's fun. Stop it.
It is fun. It is fun. But I'm very serious about having fun. That's why that's in my Twitter bio. I take having fun very seriously. That's why I bought brand new lights for the studio that for the year. So we're good to go. We're going to have the highest quality fun you can possibly have, or else. Okay, let's get through some rapid fire questions here. These are some fun ones to start off, get us all warmed up, get the juices flowing. Chris92 asked, true or false, a true freshman will appear on the 2 deep depth chart heading into West Lafayette? Nate?
Yeah, well, first of all, nothing is actually rapid fire here. As long as I'm your guest.
I love rapid fire.
Yeah.
Pause.
Yeah.
Well.
So this is my smart aleck answer is false because Penn State won't release an official depth chart. Now
we're doing that again this year. That's right. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I apologize. In reality, will any of the true freshmen be first or second string? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's sure. Already like in the 2 deep or, game day participants. That's another way of, I think, looking at that. And that's an absolute truth. I don't see any other way going into the season for that to play out unless somebody's injured.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's like one of those like technicalities, right? Where if someone isn't on the field second or first, does it mean that it's just, yes, for practical purposes, yes, somebody among the true freshman class, the class of 2022 will be in the 2 deep.
I miss the sure. Or. Because you could say, somebody's on the third line, but it says or. Like, correct. Let's pinpoint it. The running back position could have a starter and then 4 players basically listed as number 2 with an or. So you're starting to sound like a seal.
Yeah.
Or you're starting to sound like PJ Fleck when you're trying to row the boat. Is there going to be more of a 2 running back rotation this season with Nick Singleton and Kevon Lee, or possibly a 3-man rotation with Katron Allen, assuming that Penn State can run the ball better than last year? So kind of going right off of that, getting into the specifics of the first question, what do you think? 2 or 3 or what?
Yeah, I mean, I think that these things are decisions that are made for the coaching staff, but I would say fairly confidently that the Penn State's approach is they would love to have, their ideal would be to have 3 running backs getting um, some sort of fairly equitable rotation, right? Whether it's quarter by quarter, whether it's series by series by series. The more players that you have, that I think that 4 is hard, right? Like 4 creates challenges. It's hard to make everyone happy, and so no one's happy in a 4-man kind of rotation. But for 3, that's the ideal. And so if somebody emerges to the point where you have no choice but to have one guy getting right 50% and then the other 2 split the other 25 and 25, yeah, that can happen. But if they could get it to a point where it's 33, 33, 33, yeah, I think that that's what Penn State's ideal would be at that position.
I was going to say, Nate, you're terrible at rapid fire, but this is actually pretty rapid for us. So the best possible player, the most deserving players are going to see carries. And what determines the most deserving players is how much they elevate each other in the competition. So if that's 3 running backs, as you just eloquently described as the equal distribution of carries, or if somebody takes the lead, they're going to give everyone deserving of carries. They're gonna have a role. They're gonna see the football. So I think it could be 3, and then maybe even a 4th player that has a gadget role. I'm looking at you, Devin Ford, as a guy that is maybe not used primarily as a runner, but sees touches, sees some slot carries, some jet sweeps. Who knows? I'm making stuff up off the top of my head, but that's kind of what I look at is you could have 4 running backs that see the ball, but maybe only 3 get carries. Next one comes from Gorski Lion. Thomas, please tell me that the O-line will improve and make me believe you. Well, if you're phrasing it that way, you're already disinclined to believe your question. So I'll just tell you the same thing I tell everyone else when they ask me questions like that. If you want absolution, go find a religion, because you will not find that from football. So, Nate, why don't you start first, and then I will bring us home with my most eloquent, passionate speech about rationality.
Yeah. Did the offensive line suffer any injuries to any of its starters in preseason camp? Right. I'm asking in past tense while camp is still 2 weeks away.
Yeah.
And so if the answer to that is no, that they have no injuries and all of the projected starters or all of the right. I mean, we're really talking about 6 players. Sal Wormley and Hunter Norzad, figuring that out at right guard is going to be important, but otherwise you're more or less looking at Olu Fashanu at left tackle. You are looking at Landon Tengwall at left guard, Juice Scruggs at center, Norzad or Wormley at right guard, and Caden Wallace at right tackle. If those 6 go into the season healthy and stay healthy, Penn State's offensive line will be better unequivocally than it was last season.
I apologize for doing my research on the spot, but I was thinking about this when I was preparing the questions for today, and I want to make sure I get this all accurate. So give me 1 second.
I mean, I can keep talking if that helps you.
No, we're good. I think we're good to go. Okay. So let's talk about the interior, just the interior of the Penn State offensive line. Last year, Eric Wilson, 300 pounds. Mike Miranda, 305. Juice Scruggs was the biggest player last year at 310. Okay, that was the interior. Now let's go left to right of the players you just described, and I'm going to use Hunter Norzad as the starter because that's my projection going forward. He's not coming back from an injury. He's 315 pounds. Okay, so I spoiled the surprise, but 332, Landon Tengwall.
Yep.
315-ish, Juice Scruggs.
More like 320, but
yeah.
Continue.
And then 315, Hunter Norzad. Those are the official listed weights. Last year, Juice Scruggs was the biggest player at 310. Size isn't everything, but when your biggest player last year is your smallest player this year, you have significantly more strength, mass, size, power, and these are all, I think, comparable athletes to what they were last year. So Penn State has gotten bigger faster and stronger just on the interior. Caden Wallace, again, you featured him earlier this week. I did an article about him a week and a half ago about how he's improved in some areas. He's been focusing on the right stuff when it comes to the offensive line and his position, his areas of weakness, trying to make those strengths, bend, flexibility, mobility. He's been working on all that this offseason. And then you've got a guy who we cannot shut up about in Olufashanu at left tackle. We've talked about him so much as the next thing, the next super athlete at left tackle. So I don't see a way it's worse unless the left side of the line, those two young new players, don't get up to speed in time.
Yeah.
That would be the only thing. And then you might have some, I would have some legitimate questions then about coaching, because these are two players that have obvious talent, that are obviously talented. Then we would, all of the, I think, incorrect conversation about Phil Troutwine, we would start to have that conversation, I think, a little more rationally going forward. Next question. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask, was there anything about Tengwall's performances against Rutgers and in the bowl that made you think that he is not going to live up to those expectations? Exactly.
Nope. And a guy that has been coached by Phil Troutwine the whole time, and somebody that has been, came in with a certain profile and has been better than that profile. So, we're talking in hypotheticals. So the hypothetical of why should they be better? I think there's a very rational case that they absolutely should be better than they were last season. And there was somebody else on our Lions Den message board, and now I'm derailing us, of we're hoping for significant improvement or, something like that. You don't have to be significantly improved to be better. Like they were not good last year, but there were parts of their game that were acceptable, where they were good in pass protection for the most part. I think there were parts of the offensive line that functioned at times. But if you look at the totality, and also if you don't know what you're looking at, then you'll just say the whole thing was terrible. Right. I think you can see improvement without being all Americans.
Yep.
So let's move on. Chris Molnar asks, what walk-ons could be contributors this year? Interesting question. Other than the usual suspects, are there any surprise true freshmen you could see playing this year? More than 4 games. Gunners on punt coverage this. Those are 3 questions. I thought that for that second one was the same question. So any walk-ons you're interested in this year that you're keeping an eye on?
So his scholarship status is actually unclear, but Barney and Bohr is the one who jumps out to me as most likely. And I know that's not what everyone wants to hear, if anyone wants to hear that. But yeah, if Barney and Moore has a pretty good chance of winning the punting job. If not Barney and Moore, then Gabe Nwosu certainly has an opportunity as well. Alex Paqueta is the one who, they're going to have to beat out. And Alex is a scholarship punter. But yeah, there's 2 options right there who could probably win a starting job and be the guy that you see at that position this season. So
counterpoint.
Yeah.
Counterpoint. And I'm going to point at you. Counterpoint. Everyone would feel much better if there weren't walk-on players contributing, because it means that your scholarship players, the ones that you have identified as great talent, are all producing to that level.
Hey,
so maybe it is what they want to hear. There's not really a path for a lot of players at the moment.
Penn State fans love walk-ons. There is a cachet to, and I don't hate it. There's a little bit of that mentality of go getting, and I got no problem with it. There have been lots of walk-ons who have done very good things at Penn State.
Yeah. So I'll give the only one that I can think of that has is Mason Stahl a scholarship player?
He is not. He's a walk-on, and he is a receiver this year after playing quarterback last year.
Unfortunately for him, there is a lot of depth there, but I liked what I saw from him in the spring game. He was toasting starters, in the 7-on-7. His releases were really good, and he's fast. He was winning a lot of the competitions and some of the speed stuff during the winter conditioning period. So I was going to go with Dominic DeLuca, after what he did in the blue-white game, but I thought Mason Stahl had a lot of talent. I really liked watching him play. I don't know, maybe he's 6'6", somewhere 6'1", somewhere in there. I don't know if he can play in the slot, but the problem is there's just so much other talent at the receiver position. There's such great volume there. So I think he's going to be a contributor this year, but I don't know if it'll be at receiver. But I'm glad I thought of that one because I wanted to give a shout out to Mason Stahl. He was super underrated in the spring game for all the players we did talk about. Okay, this one is from Nitwit13.
Wait.
What?
We didn't handle the Gunners, and we didn't handle the true freshman
because I didn't want
play
to.
The surprise.
Well, I'll counter off of the point about Dominic DeLuca and say KJ Winston is one of my surprises that is going to see playing time behind Jonathan Sutherland because there is no depth at that position right now. There is one player and then DeLuca. So if he can, that's the opportunity. If he can fend off Tyrese Mills and KJ Winston as the guys I'm pegging as the field backers this year, if he can fend those guys off, then I think he has a chance to see some time. But both of those players are very talented players, and KJ Winston is super smart. I think he can play multiple positions. It'll just be how long does it take him to acclimate, seeing as he was not an early enrollee here at Penn State. And then I'll just finish off with Mason Stahl. Same answer for Gunner.
As a Gunner?
Why not?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And I was going to say, look for the receiver tree to put some in Gunner positions. That was a spot that they were practicing in the spring. And Terry Smith is in charge of those guys. But they'll find somebody. They've been very successful at that Gunner spot. So it's not a small thing to have someone who's reliable in filling those positions.
Just outside the box, because now we're talking about Malick Meiga as a Gunner. Humongous dude.
Yep, he was practicing at Gunner. And funny enough, I was able to talk to Drew Hartlob at Pro Day, and he talked, I asked like what translates in being able to to be a Gunner. Like, what do you need to be a good Gunner? And he was just like, there's a lot of receiver skills that carry over in terms of getting off of a jam, getting off the line, and then going. So I think, those are some of the skills that you should look for and have been successful for Penn State in the past.
Let's get to Nitwit13. Thank you, by the way, for holding me to it and answering all the questions there, because that was a good conversation. I like that. So TSC and Ryan mentioned their 15 4-star threshold that Penn State needs to get to finish with a top 10 class. First thought is who's left on the board that Penn State can get to commit. The next question is, and the real question here is, do you think Alex Birchmeier finishes as a 5-star? And are there currently any 3-star players that can climb into a 4-star tier? So to the first part, they're going to get to that point most likely here in the next couple of days, because there are both strong picks. Everyone seems to be on the same page about Tony Rojas and Tamir Robinson joining the Nittany Lions. That's 2 more 4-stars. I think that gets them to 14. So that would be 13 and 14 by Friday. So they're going to be there already. But if Alex, and this is a great question, because if Alex Birchmeier does become a 5-star, that elevates the overall average of the class, and then it bumps up the value of all those other players behind him. And then for the 3-star, I think there are a couple. One of the ones I've been looking at this year is Anthony Donko, 6'5", 315 pounds. He's been learning a lot in pass protection this year. It's something he talked about going from the spring into the summer that he wanted to focus on. He's been getting a lot of good teaching, a lot of mini camps up here at Penn State with Phil Troutwine. That changed my opinion, by the way, of his profile. Seeing like the work you can get in the off season outside of your high school. So I'm excited to watch his film this fall to see what he's been able to take from that and play with, because everything about him is a 4-star, other than he is so raw, it's hard to see. Do you have any thoughts on this one?
Nope.
You're our class ranking guy, so I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about the class ranking overall. Do you think they're going to finish the top 10?
Are they going to finish in the top 10? Maybe. If you look, Penn State is on the upper tier of total commits in that top 10. And so some of the teams that are sitting there at kind of 5, 6, 7, with 8 commits, 10 commits, right, have a lot of space to jump in the rankings, depending on how they kind of finish out their classes. So, yeah, but I think, they'll be right there. 10, 9, 12.
A lot of those, by the way, I'm pulling it up right now so we can all look at it together. A lot of those teams have kind of made that move as well. So we just check it out here on the On3 team rankings. Ohio State, Notre Dame, Alabama, they have been fighting for that top spot. Alabama has jumped up now with a couple of 5-star commitments in the last couple of days. I think Miami is going to finish near the top 5. They are now trending for Samson Okunlola, who is one of my favorite prospects. They're going to have 2 5-star offensive linemen in their class. Mario Cristobal already doing big work there. So those teams are locked in ahead of Penn State. Georgia, you just assume they're going to finish there. And then it comes down to what happens with Tennessee, LSU, USC, like this clump right here.
Yep.
And one of the other things that's going to happen is there are going to be more 5-stars minted over the next couple of months as they expand that to be 32 to the first round number of players that the On3 ranking staff thinks will be guys that end up as first-round picks. So do Javen Williams and does Alex Birchmeier, do they fit that category? I think you could make a case for either of them. So that would go a long way into Penn State becoming a top 10 class. But there's a couple of teams underneath them that you would consider. Oregon as a 5-star. But again, like you mentioned, they don't have a lot of recruits in these classes. USC, you assume they're going to make a move. So, it's going to be close. It's going to be a close call here for Penn State. Okay, so Blue Hornet 22 asks, do we think Sutherland will wear 0 since 0 is the special teams captain number and he's going to be a starter on defense? So he's still going to be the special teams captain even if he's a starter on defense, right, Nate? Like you're going to see a lot of Jonathan Sutherland this year playing on 2 teams.
Yeah. Yes.
So he's still going to be number 0.
Yeah, I mean, it would surprise me if he's not. I'm not really sure who else. Like he loves special teams.
Yeah,
he's really into it, and obviously provides leadership in those roles. He's embraced it. I mean, he's kind of the model of what Penn State wants to see out of specifically that, right? Like,
yeah,
you want non-walk-ons, right? So yeah. Yes, special teams are an opportunity for some walk-ons to shine, and they really make the most of the opportunity. But you also, and the second tier, I would call it, is freshmen, right? Freshmen, sophomores who aren't going to play otherwise, who get that opportunity and also make the most of it. But what you really, really, really want is starters. Veterans, 5th-year guys, 6th-year guys who love special teams, who are so into it, who pay attention to the details, who know what to do, when to do it, and can create that model for everyone else to follow. And so, John Sutherland has done that throughout his career at Penn State. There's a reason why he's been a captain for special teams before. He'll be a captain for special teams again.
And it's his path to the NFL because he is a great athlete. He is.
It's the path for a lot of people to the NFL. It's the differentiator. So many people talk about that if this is what you want, I had an interview with Stacey Collins earlier this summer where he literally said that. He was like, if you don't establish that culture in your college football program, and he's been all over the place, right? A lot of places don't have it. They pay lip service. They talk about it. They say, yeah, we take special teams seriously, but they don't actually take it seriously. And the way that manifests itself is by not devoting practice time to it, by not devoting meeting time to it, by not allowing the special teams coach to have access to players that are important on offense and defense to maximize what those units can do. And he said, hey, if you want to play in the NFL, if you want to be on the 53-man roster, this is what you have to do. This is how you distinguish yourself, is not just being willing to play special teams, but loving special teams and standing out on special teams. If you can do that, you'll find a role for yourself. And I think that honestly, if you look around the landscape of Penn State's current NFL players, a lot of those guys fill and fit that mold of guys who are performing on special teams and do it well.
Yeah, at least again to start as rookies, because if you're a rookie and they want you to contribute, and you need to, especially if you're a mid-round pick, you need to provide maximum value. So guys that can provide that on special teams are very important, but more so than a guy that stands out to me is Tyler Matakevich, who went to the Steelers and then the Bills later and was a special teams starter. Like he was paid almost like a starter, but he was a special teams captain. Who's the guy for the New England Patriots? I can't remember his name, but there are these guys that are like essential parts of your team because they're so great at special teams. They're not a guy that you have for 2 or 3 years. Like you specifically seek these guys out. I see that as something Jonathan Sutherland can be in the future because he is so athletic. He's got starter level athleticism, but the instincts and everything else really hasn't worked out for him so far. We'll see if he can do that going forward, but he's in that situation of he's 6 foot, 205 pounds and needs to play a position that doesn't exist in the NFL. So that's going to be tough for him going forward to see a spot where he plays on defense, but special teams, I can definitely see that. We have our first sponsor here on the BWI Daily Edition. Have you been looking for a reliable source of Penn State football tickets? Jim at TixManJim.com, formerly PSUTixman.com, has been running his ticket exchange in Wilmington, Delaware for over 25 years. Every buyer is handled with courtesy, respect, and every ticket purchased is guaranteed. Proceeds are used to fund the PSU AA Chapter Scholarship Fund and the PSU Levi Lamb Fund for athletic scholarships. Get your home opener tickets, your Ohio State Stripeout tickets, and your Minnesota Homecoming Whiteout tickets. Go now to TixManJim.com or email TixManJim@gmail.com or call 302-521-8380. That's 302-521-8380. And you can see his, if you're watching here on YouTube, you can check out his website here at the bottom of the screen. So getting back to the BWI mailbag show, we're going to go on to Arun, who has a question. He's a new member at Blue White Illustrated. Thank you for signing up. Thank you for being a part of the team, Arun. What position group do you feel are the most efficient going into the season? And do you feel upgrades being done to Lash Building, bringing up to par with other Big Ten programs? We'll get to that one in a second. First off, deficient position groups heading into the season. Is there any place that you look at and go, Penn State is not, maybe they're in a precarious position heading into Big Ten play?
I think that injuries on the offensive line would be devastating. So precarious, yeah, that would qualify. And the defensive line, I think, is a concern. I think both, right? And so much of what happens is dictated by the success of those two groups that, yeah, if the players who currently are aligned or penciled in as starters, who the expectations are the highest, if those all work out, right? If those all happen, if they all hit, then they're fine. Not only are they fine, I think they can have a really good season. I think Penn State football can have a really good season. If there's adversity there in the form of injury, setbacks, suspensions, whatever it is, right? Because that's what happened last year.
Yeah.
By midway through the season, 3/4 of the defensive line was not who was anticipated to be there before the season. So, yeah, I mean, those are two groups, and then obviously linebacker. But beyond that, I think that they have a fairly solid outlook at the rest of.
You're helping everybody out here. Like, yeah, everyone's solid. I have concerns about the offensive line, the defensive line, and linebacker.
My main concern. Yeah, my main concern on Penn State's behalf is just because this is what you see is depth, right? Yeah. Like nobody gets through the season without having setbacks in injuries. It just does not happen.
Is this, I'm starting to think this is every program now where you can't hoard talent the same way, because the transfer portal allows you to go somewhere else and play if you feel like you've made a mistake or you feel like there's no path to the field. So, I don't know, this is a uniquely Penn State problem to start with. That's the first thing I want to say. Yeah. Secondly, I think defensive end is fine. Terms and conditions apply. All the guys, like you just said, the players that are there now all have to perform up to expectations. I actually am a little bit more optimistic even about the depth of the offensive line. Terms and conditions apply there as well. I need to know, James Franklin mentioned JB Nelson being a part of the competition on the interior. He's built himself back up a little bit. He was looked a little thin at the spring game. Like he had he gone a little too far into the losing the bad weight, needed to add some more good weight. So is Vega Ioane a part of that conversation? Because if he is, if he can get up to speed and be a part of that interior, you've got a couple of massive movement players on the interior, and that kind of protects the tackles as well, because Landon Tengwall can kick out there. Hunter Norzad played tackle for a long time. Emergency situation, he can kick back out there. And then you've got depth and talent on the interior, but it is about getting those guys up to speed physically or mentally. The one place I look at is that one technique. And I don't know that there's a huge difference here, because Manny Diaz wants you to play on the other side of the line of scrimmage anyway. You're not going to be absorbing double teams a lot, but somebody has to line up closer to the center. Like, that's just how a 4-down front works. So is PJ Mustipher healthy? And if he's not, I don't see the depth of pure, like, run first players or guys that can control that double team, because you've got Devon Ellis, who struggled at it last year. He's got to be better this year. You got PJ Mustipher, who's injured. And then you got my guy Jordan Vandenberg, who I think can do it, but he would benefit from being the guy that's aggressive and penetrating and not being the guy hitting, the double teams and all that stuff. So I think that it's going to be fine, but I could see that one technique position. If somebody gets hurt, maybe some issues there. Beaverman 72. Which position battles are you most interested in heading into training camp? What a great transition here, Beaverman. Look at that. Which one of these competitions, and why is it Mike linebacker?
Kicker and punter.
Yes.
I'm
accurate.
I'm mostly serious too. I am anxious to see. I'm eagerly anticipating seeing how those positions shake out, because I do think they're important, and I think that the players who are battling for it all have intriguing storylines behind them. And then, running back's going to be interesting. I think figuring out 3rd/4th/5th receiver is going to be interesting. Tight end should be interesting. I think I think that when you look across the field, there's a lot of, hey, this is how we all thought it would play out, but also, no, somebody could make a move, right? Like there's potential for, I think, not necessarily starters losing jobs as much as backups chipping away and eating into starters playing time. Like that's a lot of the field.
And you just played right into the conversation I wanted to have of that defensive tackle position. So despite what I just said about maybe some of the sub issues within that group, it's going to be exciting to watch all of those players compete for playing time at defensive tackle. You've got 3 or 4 guys that I really like between Vandenberg, Zane Durant, Hakeem Beeman, and I still hold out hope that Keziah Izzard is going to be as explosive as he looked in high school and flashed at times during the blue-white game. He did some good things during the blue-white game. So you got 4 guys right there. They're kind of all 3 techniques, but again, does that matter? Trying to learn more about Manny Diaz's defense. And I think it's just going to be get the guys on the field that perform the best at winning their gap and ruining the day of the offensive lineman across from them. So I don't think that even my concern about that one technique is entirely founded, because I don't know that that's how it's really going to play out. So I'd say defensive tackle, and then secondarily, I don't know that tight end is a competition. We're going to get to it in a little bit here with one of our other questions. So I'll move on to safety.
Yeah, I was going to follow you up safety for sure.
Yeah. I think it's just going to be fun watching guys that are talented push guys that are talented that are the starters. Yep. You know, like Zakee Wheatley, there is legitimate hype behind him being a talented player and being a guy that makes a serious impact this year. So can he eat into the reps that he becomes the starter? Can he flip that percentage, or is he going to be a role player in the secondary?
Here's Keaton Ellis. No one talks about Keaton Ellis.
Yeah. Well, that's the other half of that coin. So that's exactly what I'm talking about is Keaton Ellis and Zakee Wheatley. Those two guys are going to battle it out, I think, at that field safety position for who's going to be the guy that is in there making plays. Because you got to make plays now. It's not about being dependable. Wheatley can get the ball.
But that's the question, though, because Manny Diaz said it, right? If you make a mistake at safety, it's a home run. It's a touchdown. There's no one behind that safety. And so do you want Mr. Reliable, who nobody talks about because he's reliable, Keaton Ellis, or do you want the guy who is going to make interceptions, right? Who just the ball is attracted to him. I think that's a legitimate conversation and a legitimate give and take that they're going to have to make in terms of decisions for that spot.
Yeah, it's going to be that's why it's a great battle going into training camp. And I think you notice how neither of us really mentioned the middle linebacker spot. They're both going to play.
And they're going to be fine. They're going to be fine. They're better than they anticipated. They're like both of those guys are is it further or further along? It's not farther. Farther is a measure of distance. So
I would have used them synonymously. So you're ahead of me in this conversation. This is a question from last week that I really wanted to get to, but for some reason it didn't show up in the list of questions we had. So DG Numbers at the Lines and Message Forum asks, will this Manny Diaz defense return to what was pre-2021 Brent Pry in terms of getting after the quarterback and trying to get sacks instead of playing more of a contained rush? Penn State was third behind Clemson and Bama for a 4-year stretch with only one of a few teams with 40 sack seasons. Defensive end is a question mark, but the scheme that makes a result possible for that talent to show up on the field. This is a great question. This is something that I've been wondering and we've been talking about for quite a bit. Is there anything in your conversation with him that leads you one way or the other in this particular vein of thought?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the question is John Scott's role in all of this, because certainly it seems to me as though Manny Diaz prioritizes and values splash plays on the defensive line, right? You want sacks, you want tackles for loss, and you certainly want strip sacks. All of those things are game-changing plays. When John Scott replaced Sean Spencer, the conversation changed to, hey, and again, I'm speaking peripherally here, but the conversation changed to, we have found, yes, we still want sacks, but we have found that there is a vulnerability that reveals itself repeatedly. And I think that was a fair critique, or like a self-critique of running quarterbacks, not just running quarterbacks, but any time that pass rush didn't get home, Penn State was really suffering some kind of iconic back-breaking third and long scrambles that were going for first downs and keeping drives alive. Defense couldn't get off the field. And it's hard to quibble when the defense has been as consistently good as it has been for Penn State. Obviously, that's why Brent Pry has a head coaching job right now, is that he has demonstrated that. But if there was an argument to be made, it's, hey, your focus on getting those sack numbers and having those types of plays is creating a bigger vulnerability than honestly I think that they were comfortable with. So yeah. that's a balance that I think is going to have to figure itself out. I don't really have a sense of that right now. Because
so
go ahead.
Let me explain what I see as the difference here. So one of the main things about Brent Pry was in those situations that you talked about, you play zone coverage. They would drop into spot zones in third and whatever it was, and they would rush 4. And the way it works is that there are 4 defensive linemen and 5 offensive linemen, which means if you're not in your gap as a pass rusher, in your pass rushing lane, and the quarterback breaks the pocket, you've created that space, right?
Yep.
So it is a very standard, here's what we're doing. We'll disguise the coverage, but you kind of know what we're going to do. And then with Manny Diaz, I think the thing that you know he's going to do is throw something crazy at you. So he might bring 4, but 4 of them are coming from one side of the offensive line. Like, in hyperbole here. It might be a rusher. There might be a stunt on top of a twist, on top of a blitz. You might have, and that creates free runs of the quarterback. So then the quarterback doesn't have anywhere to go because you have defeated not just with your own talent, but you have defeated with scheme and speed the ability to get to the quarterback. What that does, and this is the whole conversation I've been having in my head this offseason, is when you blitz, you leave yourself vulnerable. If you don't get home, what you have done is you've taken players out of coverage and you have given the quarterback more time to look at it. So it is risk reward, but that's where the defensive coordinator and the talent have to mesh of put your players in position to succeed. And if you get a one-on-one block, you have to beat it. If you're Curtis Jacobs and you get a free run at a running back, there's no you hit him and you disrupt the play. You've got to make that guy a speed bump to the quarterback. Like that's you've got to capitalize on that because you've been given the rush that can change the play. And if the quarterback gets out of that, that's the danger. Where then you've got, I don't care if it's zone or man, if you've got 5 guys in the pass pattern and 5 guys covering, that's man coverage. You're single coverage in the secondary. That's a big thing. And that's one of the reasons I want to know, are they going to go after it or are they going to play more that contain? So that it was a great question I wanted to get to last week. And, I'm excited to find that particular answer out over the first 3 weeks of the season. Our next question is sorry, I had to go from analyst to host, and there's just slight pause. Ken H on Twitter asks, PSU fans should feel better about the season if blank has a strong fall camp. I'll just continue the conversation. Chop Robinson. Answers the question without having to even ask it, is if you've got Adisa, I guess it would be Adisa Isaac and Chop Robinson. But one of those guys has a strong camp. Penn State has a very potent pass rush heading into the first game. I think a lot of the defensive problems are solved. At that point, I'm less concerned about the interior because that'll shake itself out. What about you?
I'm gonna curveball you here. Mike Yurcich. If Mike Yurcich has a strong fall camp, then Penn State fans should feel better. And what I mean by that,
I like that.
Do you like that?
I like that a lot.
Yeah, because here's the thing. Sean Clifford is what he is. You could say both of them in tandem for sure. Mm-hmm. But I think so much of what Penn State does this season will be dictated by this dual comfort level that has to exist between quarterback and the offensive coordinator. If the offensive coordinator is not comfortable, if Mike Yurcich isn't comfortable, and there's no reason to believe that he won't be, I think that was a storyline through the spring and summer that he feels better, right? I mean, Sean Clifford talked about it with me, that he felt as though his grasp of the offense allowed Mike Yurcich to have fewer reservations and just it's all about expanding, right?
Call what you want, not what you feel like you have to call.
Correct.
That's the situation.
How many ingredients are in the kitchen for the cook to work with, right?
Yeah.
Remember Top Chef, and they'd have to pick out 7 things from a vending machine and you kind of figure it out and make it work. And Cheetos, it was disgusting. If you are presented a basket, a cornucopia of ingredients that you feel good about how they can all work together or not, right? You extract some when you don't need to use the garlic, right? Like it's simply a matter of, can you compose, right, with no inhibition or restriction or not? And I think that last year
here's another part of those meals. Another part of those meals is and I said this on the message board the other day, it's cohesion.
Mm-hmm.
It's do your garlic mashed potatoes work with your lamb? You got to make sure that the whole thing complements itself so that you have something that is not just a collection of good food or a collection of good plays, but it elevates it to something better. And that's what a system is. And you don't want to be married and a slave to your system. But if you believe in stuff and I think we've seen that he can augment what he does to suit his talent. But if you feel good and you believe in certain tenets and you can't use those tenets in your offense, then you are not as good of a coordinator. And this year, I think they're going to be able to do that. Here's a great question. Injuries aside, will the linebackers who start game 1 be the same linebackers who start game 12? And Mike, I don't think it's going to be the same linebacker that starts game 1, that starts game 12. Like, I don't think it's going to be game 2. I think that there's going to be multiple guys playing that position, especially at the Mike, next to Curtis Jacobs, because we're taking Curtis Jacobs. He's the starter. We're eliminating any discussion of anything else there. It's really the Mike linebacker position. And you've got guys that are sub 215 playing the striker position. Those are safeties. I'm not having the conversation again about those guys being linebackers. I'm just not going to do it until they move somebody over there that is a linebacker. I'm not talking about that. We have 2 box positions. That's it. So it's about those guys. And to me, it's whether it's 2 or 3 by the end of the season that are cycling in there at that position.
I'll accept. I mean, I think that Elsdon probably has the edge, but they're both going to play with Kobe King. So I will say yes. Between those 2 box linebacker positions, Curtis Jacob and Tyler Elsdon will start every game.
Yes. So start. Again,
what doesn't matter. Exactly.
Yeah. What does start mean? And this is what I'm trying to learn about Manny Diaz is what does he value at these positions as opposed to what we've seen before. And if Kobe King is and Tyler Elsdon and Ellis Brooks really is the epitome of like, what's a good Brent Pry Mike linebacker? What we're seeing from Manny Diaz in the conversations I'm hearing about recruiting and some of the other players that are being mentioned is that size matters and speed. Like your biggest, fastest player, you're going to put at that Mike position. You want him to run more so than you want him to be kind of the fluid between the tackles, defeat you with his caginess sort of guy. You want a guy that's explosive and downhill, but also can cover. Yeah. So, is this a situation like with Micah Parsons? How good is Abdul Carter? Because he's not going away in this conversation, even with the way they feel about the 2 middle linebackers playing better in the spring. We're still hearing about Abdul Carter. So how good is he? Does he force himself into that conversation? Old Frog 26. What does it take to win the Outland Trophy? And does Landon Tagwell have a chance of winning one at Penn State? I love this question. This is a good question. Nate, other than social media vibes and the stodgy media press, voting for people, I don't actually know what it takes to win any of these trophies. You got to be on a winning team, first off.
Yeah.
I think that's the main thing.
Yeah. A lot of press clippings. I mean, some of it's ridiculous, right? Like,
yeah.
Again, I love punting so much, but Jordan Stout didn't win any awards. He won the Big Ten Punter of the Year, but he didn't win any of the national awards last year when he was plainly the best punter in the country.
Yeah.
And the NFL.
One dude had a nickname of Punt God. So what are you going to do about that?
Look, so no, I don't know. I don't know.
So
maybe.
Let me answer the second part. Does he have a chance of winning one at Penn State? It is very hard to do. But yes. So if you're an All-American offensive lineman, and I think that's the upper end of Landon Tangwall's ability, then yes, you have a chance of winning the Outland Trophy. Philip in the Valley, tight end group. Who gets the most snaps, the most receiving yards, and the most receptions? I'm not going to answer. I'm not going to throw my dart into the wind about the top two receiving yards and receptions. But this is an interesting question about role in the offense. So I think, number one, Brenton Strange is still going to get the most snaps because he's the most proven run blocker of the group. So really, it's about who gets the most receptions and receiving yards. And that guy's probably the same player. Like, right. I don't think you're going to have all three of those guys being major roles in the receiving core because there's so many other options in the offense. So it's going to come down to who wins that particular job. And that switched midway through last year, where it was Brenton Strange and then it became Theo Johnson. And what does Tyler Warren have to say about that?
Same. Yeah. I mean,
do you have a pick between the three of who you think is going to be the receiver of the group?
Theo Johnson.
Yeah, feels like it. I love Tyler Warren. I just love the way he plays football, and I think he might be, I don't know if he'll end up being the guy with the most snaps, but he'll be a surprise maybe second, because he's going to be a good run blocker this year. He's put in the work in the weight room, and he's getting more acclimated to the position.
Yeah, they got to figure it out. I mean, that's I don't think they got enough. I hate saying this way, but like, I don't think they took enough criticism last year for what that position group did. They weren't the consistent factor that they need to be, I think, for Penn State's offense to reach its full potential.
Yep. Yeah. And part of that is getting quality.
And I like
receptions.
All those guys. Just
yeah. No,
right?
it's fair criticism. So it's a balance of how much is on them to produce and how much is on them to produce the targets they get, which are not always the most quality targets to produce on. Sure. But I remember specific instances where there were contested catches near the goal line that these guys could have caught that they didn't. There are plays that were, not the most spectacular. So they need to, when the ball comes their way, catch it without fail. That's going to be determining whether or not they see more snaps from Clifford. We don't have time for this question, but I wanted to bring this up. Who's the Penn State football Mount Rushmore for the 2010s? And I think it's pretty clear the top three in terms of most excellent football players. So we're not talking about fan favorites or guys that are meaningful, but like are both meaningful, best players. They're the whole thing. Saquon Barkley, Trace McSorley, and Allen Robinson would be the three. And then we were having a good conversation about the fourth. So how about this, Nate? Yeah. Instead of us answering this question, put in the video here, drop in who you think is the fourth player on the Mount Rushmore for Penn State in the 2010s. And we'll read the best answer on the mailbag next week. PSU 1986, another new member. I love having new members. I love having new question askers. When building a football playoff caliber team, are you looking at hitting 2 or 3 classes in a row in recruiting? With the 2022 class as a top-ranked class, should Penn State fans be looking at their junior, senior year for a playoff run? I don't have a good answer to this question, Nate.
I do.
Okay, please tell me.
I ran the numbers from last year's national championship game, Alabama and Georgia. 4-year run for Georgia. If you averaged it out, Georgia finished 2.1, I want to say. And Alabama was like 2.6, meaning Georgia had the best rolling 4-year average in college football recruiting classes over that span. And Alabama had the second. And so it's not 2 or 3. I think it's 4. And then I think it's also how you do in the transfer portal for sure. But the biggest takeaway from it was they didn't even hit on, 80% of their 5 stars, right?
Right.
It's that you amass this group of this talent, right?
Yep.
And so you don't have to be successful on every single one of those. When Penn State gets 2 5-stars, 3 5-stars over a 4-year span. If Georgia and Alabama are doing that every single year, it's a difference. It's a difference, and it presents itself ultimately. So no, I mean, I think that.
Can I counter with a comparison here, because I think it's a very good comparison when you're talking about Georgia and Alabama, because they're competing directly with each other in their conference, and Penn State has to. It's not just it's who you're recruiting against regionally. So Jason Moore, a Penn State regional player, goes to Ohio State. That is not only it is a net loss. It's not even kind of this ethereal loss of you lost a player. You directly lost somebody to your competition within your own division in your conference. And when you throw, so losing to Notre Dame, you want those players, but it's not a direct competition, because you can get into the college football playoff if you win your conference.
Yep.
But Penn State can't get over Ohio State. They cannot match that. And if they can get on the same level where they're in the top 5 and they're competing and they're winning these battles where they don't lose Jason Moore every year, then they absolutely are on par with Ohio State. And that's part of the recruiting process that is important for Penn State to reach that same level of competition when it comes to drawing players in. They got to win some of these direct recruiting battles on top of being just nationally in the top 10. And I think this year is a good step towards that. But they got to finish strong if we're talking about college football playoff and all that stuff. Sykim asks, T-Frank, you get very enthusiastic about certain players who show excellent, exciting potential, but don't sugarcoat the opposite when a player is not developing. In this era of needing to add portal players to fill weaknesses on a roster, how do coaches handle situations where a player, for one reason or other, is not cutting it or showing the promise, perhaps, that needs to transfer to a lower level of football? I would have thought that I was sugarcoating it way more than I was. I feel like I sugarcoat things a lot. Maybe I'm just a huge jerk, Nate. And I should be nicer.
There's nothing wrong with being kind.
Carefrontations, I believe, is the word you call it, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
It's called a carefrontation.
Yeah.
Going back to
and being honest, that I think that the less that you, if you're honest with your players as a coach, people take the hint, right? Like, because most of these guys are competitive, they all want to play.
Yeah.
So either and if they don't, then they need to extract themselves from college football. So
we have just a few minutes left here, and just a reminder that Tony Rojas is making his college decision live on YouTube. So if you are going to if you're watching the BWI Daily Edition, you've got some YouTube watching to do, because flip over to I believe it's the Fairfax High School YouTube channel to watch that announcement. And then if he picks Penn State, flip right back over here, because we will have a breakdown of that. I'm going to be busy this afternoon here on YouTube, because we'll have the breakdown of Tony Rojas committing to Penn State, if that is in fact what he does. Spencer, we answered this question a little bit earlier. I just wanted to show how great I am at Photoshop. Will Clifford finish the season as a starter, Nate? Here's a great question. I think these are back-to-back questions about the quarterback. So these are two sides of the same coin. So will he finish the season as a quarterback? Will any of the backups get quality playing time with the first-string offense? Basically, is Penn State going to roll over any player, any teams this year to get their second and third string guys on the football field?
Yes, it's still an uphill climb. I think there are maybe 3 or 4 teams on the schedule in the bottom 70 of FPI, right? So expected to not be very good. Yeah, look, it's just points. It's just points. If Penn State can score points, then you're ahead by enough touchdowns, 4 or 5 getting into the fourth quarter, then yes, you have an opportunity to do that. I don't hold it against, I don't think it's, James Franklin is very transparent about what it is, right? And what it is you have to hold a significant lead, because it can get taken away very quickly in college football.
And you can't shift your mentality and put your starters back in. That's always a tough thing.
Correct.
You don't want to be in that situation. So that'll do it today for the BWI Daily Edition. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr, senior editor, Nate Bauer. We are getting out of here so you can go find out the destiny of Penn State football and whether or not they can get that top 10 recruiting class coming up today with Tony Rojas and Tamir Robinson tomorrow. As always, we'll be breaking down the recruiting information. Greg Pickle stepping in for Ryan Snyder tomorrow on Friday. The news of today, previewing the news of this weekend. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr. We'll talk to you then.